She thought she knew everything about the man she married. She thought she knew the way he took his coffee. Black, no sugar, always too hot, always drunk standing at the kitchen window. She thought she knew the sound of his footsteps in the hallway at night, heavy, certain, the footsteps of a man who had never once been afraid of the dark. She thought she knew the way he looked at her across a dinner table, quiet, steady, like she was the only thing in the room that made sense. She thought she knew him. She was wrong. Not because he was hiding cruelty, not because he was hiding coldness, but because the man she had shared a bed with for 11 years, the man she had built a life with, the man she had watched hold their children and kiss their foreheads and sit beside hospital beds and pray. That man had been carrying something inside him so large, so heavy, so impossible, that he had never once found the words to put it down. And when she finally found out the truth, it didn't destroy her. It broke her open, in the best way a person can be broken. Elena Vasquez was 34 years old when her husband's past walked through the front door. Not in the way she had always feared. Not with badges and warrants and the sound of boots on the porch at 6 a.m. Not with a phone call from a lawyer. Not with a name in the news. Not with someone from his old world showing up to remind him that the old world had a long memory. It walked through her front door in the shape of a letter, handwritten, pale blue envelope. The return address was a prison in Central Texas. The name in the corner was one she had never heard, a name her husband had never spoken. She almost didn't open it. She almost set it on his desk and left it there, the way she left all his things, undisturbed, respected, belonging to a part of his life that she had learned over 11 years was his to keep. But something stopped her. The handwriting. Because the handwriting on the envelope, the careful, deliberate, slightly uneven letters, looked exactly like her husband's handwriting from the early years. Before his hand steadied. Before whatever had steadied it. She opened it. She read it standing in the hallway. By the time she reached the 3rd paragraph, she was sitting on the floor. By the end, but she was not the same woman who had opened the envelope. What she discovered about the man she had married didn't leave her horrified in the way the word is usually used. It left her horrified the way you are horrified by something enormous and true. The way you are horrified when you realize that the person you love has been carrying pain so old and so deep that they had no language for it. The way you are horrified when you understand, finally, who your husband actually is, and realize that the man you thought you knew was only the surface of something so much larger. This is the story of Elena and Marco Vasquez. This is the story of what she found, and this is the story of what she did with it. Before we talk about the letter, you need to understand who Elena was. Not the version people saw from outside, the real version. Elena Reyes grew up in San Antonio, Texas, in a house where the windows faced west and the light in the afternoon came through them golden and warm, and turned everything it touched into something that looked like it belonged in a painting. Her mother, Carmen, was the kind of woman who made Sunday dinner for 12 people every week without once writing anything down. Her father, Roberto, worked the same job for 30 years and came home every evening at 5:45 and hung his jacket on the same hook by the door and called out the same thing, "I'm home." And the house answered him with noise and smell and the particular warmth of a place that knew it was loved. Elena grew up believing this was how life worked. That love was a thing you showed up for every day, that a home was built from repetition, that the most important things were the ordinary ones. When she was 23 when she met Marco, she was not looking for someone like him. She was not looking for anyone at all, if she was being honest. She was in the middle of her second year of nursing school. She was working double shifts at a diner on Saturdays to pay for books. She was tired in the specific way of someone running at 100% with no margin for error. She had no time for distraction. Marco Vasquez walked into the diner on a Saturday in April. He sat at the last stool at the counter and ordered coffee. He looked at the menu for a long time. He was not a large man, not in the way that announces itself immediately. He was lean, careful, the kind of man who takes up exactly the space he intends to. He had dark hair going slightly gray at the temples even at 30. He had hands that looked like they had done serious work. He had eyes that were very still. That was the first thing Elena noticed. His eyes were completely still. Most people's eyes move constantly. Even when they are not reading or looking at something specific, they drift. They blink quickly. They flinch at peripheral movement. They are always slightly ahead of the rest of the person, always scanning, always calculating distance. Marco's eyes did not move like that. They settled. They stayed. He looked at the menu and then he looked up, and Elena was already looking, and neither of them looked away first. He said, "I'll take whatever you think is good. Not as a line, not performed, just that." A man who had decided in 1 second that her opinion was worth having. She brought him the eggs and toast. He ate all of it. He left a tip that was 3 times the bill and a note on the napkin that said only, "Same time next Saturday?" She kept the napkin. She should not have kept the napkin. She knew even then something about him that had no name yet. Something that sat below the surface of him the way a current sits below still water. She knew without knowing that he was not a simple man, that his life was not the kind of life she had grown up beside. She kept the napkin. He came back the following Saturday, and the one after that, and the one after that. By June, they were taking long drives in his car, windows down, through the Texas hill country where the road runs between Cedar and Mesquite, and the sky at dusk is the particular orange-purple of something you can't describe to someone who hasn't seen it. He talked about things that surprised her. Not the topics she expected from a man who looked like he looked. He talked about his grandmother. He talked about cooking. He talked about the way light moves differently in the morning than in the afternoon and how most people don't notice. He did not talk about his work. He said, "I run some businesses, import mostly, some property." And then he changed the subject. She let him change it. She was 23 years old and he was the most interesting person she had ever sat beside, and she let him change the subject because she was not ready to know what she already suspected. They married at 24. Her mother cried at the wedding. Her father shook Marco's hand and held it for a long time and looked at him with the look of a man passing something precious to someone he is not sure about but is choosing to trust anyway. Marco held the handshake and did not look away. Elena watched that handshake and thought, whatever else is true about this man, that is real. 11 years. 11 years of ordinary mornings. The coffee, black, too hot, drunk, standing at the kitchen window, the sound of his footsteps. The way he held their children, first Sophia, then Mateo, with the particular care of a man who did not trust himself at first, and then trusted himself completely, the careful becoming natural over months, over years. They had a house in a quiet neighborhood in Austin. Not large, not small. A yard with a tree that the children climbed and that Marco periodically threatened to have cut down for safety reasons and never actually cut down. A kitchen that Elena had painted yellow 3 years after they moved in, and that Marco had looked at for one silent moment and then said, "It's good. It's exactly right." Elena worked shifts at the hospital. Marco ran his businesses, most of which she understood and some of which she had learned over years not to ask about in detail. This is the thing people don't understand about marriages to men like Marco. It is not ignorance. It is not weakness. It is a decision. A clear-eyed, disconscious, repeated decision made every morning to inhabit the part of the man that belongs to you and to respect the part that doesn't. To build your life in the room he has opened rather than breaking down the doors to the rooms that are closed. Elena had made this decision. She had made it with full knowledge of what it cost. She had made it because the man who stood at the kitchen window drinking his coffee, who laughed at their children's jokes with his whole face, who showed up to every school play and every parent-teacher meeting and every Saturday morning pancake breakfast without being asked. That man was worth the price of the closed doors. She believed this. She still believes it. But she did not know, in 11 years of believing it, what was inside those closed doors. She did not know what Marco had done before Austin, before Texas, before her. She did not know about the boy he had been. She did not know about the choices that had turned that boy into the man at the kitchen window. She did not know about the thing he had done, once, a long time ago, that he had carried every day since like a stone in his chest. A stone that had a name. A name on a pale blue envelope with a return address from a prison in Central Texas. She did not know. Until the letter. It came on a Thursday. She almost missed it. The mail on Thursdays was usually bills and catalogs and the occasional card from her mother, who still sent cards by post because she did not entirely trust that email was permanent enough for important things. Elena pulled the stack from the mailbox without looking, tucked it under her arm, went inside. Sophia was at school. Matteo was at school. Marco was at his office downtown. The house was the particular quiet of a weekday morning, just the kind of quiet that belongs entirely to the person moving through it. Elena made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, sorted the mail, bill, catalog, card from her mother, a birthday card 2 weeks early because Carmen Reyes did not believe in cutting these things close. Advertisement. And then the pale blue envelope. She picked it up. The return address stopped her. A correctional facility in Huntsville, Texas. The name above the address, R. Dela Cruz. She turned the envelope over. Was Marco's name, their home address, handwritten. She sat with it for a moment. In 11 years, nothing like this had come. In 11 years, she had learned to read the calibration of threat in her own nervous system. She knew the difference between the anxiety that meant pay attention and the anxiety that meant this is already too late. She had developed this the way nurses develop it about pain in patients, not from a textbook, from years of presence, from standing beside enough moments of crisis to understand the shape of the thing before the shape is clear. This was the pay attention kind. She opened it. Dear Marco, I know you told me not to write. I know you meant it. I've respected that for 8 years, and I would have kept respecting it except my daughter found me last month." She stopped. She read that line again. "My daughter found me last month." She kept reading. "Her name is Rosa. She's 23 years old. She grew up not knowing who her father was. Her mother, you'll remember Maria, told her I was dead. It was the kindest lie she could tell. She told Rosa her father was a good man who died young. Not that her father was sitting in a federal facility with 22 years left on his sentence. Elena's hands were steady, her nursing hands. She was trained for steadiness. She kept reading. "Rosa found me anyway. She's the kind of woman who doesn't accept what she's told when what she's told doesn't feel complete. She found me, and she came to see me. She sat across the glass, and she looked at me, and she said, 'I just wanted to know who you were. Marco, she looks like her mother. She has my eyes. She is 23 years old, and she does not hate me. I don't know what I did to deserve that. I probably didn't deserve it. But she asked me one thing before she left. She asked me what happened the night her mother left. The real story, not the one she'd pieced together from court records. And I couldn't tell her. Not because I don't know, because there is a part of that night that belongs to you, that you carried for both of us. I'm not asking you to carry it anymore. But Marco, I'm asking you to tell your wife. She deserves to know who you are, because I watched you become that person, and it is not a small thing. You saved my life. Tell her." Elena sat on the floor of the hallway. She did not know when she moved from the kitchen to the hallway. She did not know how long she sat there. She read the letter 4 times. Then she set it on the hallway table, and she did what she always did when something arrived that was too large for the moment. She went to work. She washed the breakfast dishes. She folded the laundry. She moved through the house with the focused efficiency of a person keeping her hands busy because her hands know what her mind does not yet know, that the only way through something large is through it. And the only way to prepare for through is to do the small things first. At noon, she ate a sandwich standing at the counter. At 2, she drove to the school and picked up Sophia and Matteo. She listened to them talk about their day on the drive home, their voices overlapping, Sophia's higher and faster, Matteo's lower and certain, the sound of her children that was more familiar to her than her own heartbeat. She watched them in the rearview mirror. She thought, they look like him. Sophia has his eyes, that same stillness. Matteo has his hands. Already, at 8 years old, he holds things with that particular care. She drove home. She made dinner. She waited. Marco came home at 6:15. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door. He called out, "I'm home." The house answered him the way it always did. He kissed Elena. He sat at the kitchen table and talked to Sophia about a math problem she was struggling with, and talked to Matteo about the soccer game on Saturday, and he ate dinner, and he helped clear the plates. And he was exactly himself. Completely, fully, exactly himself. No different, no trace. He did not know about the letter. Elena watched him across the table and felt something shift in her chest. Not anger, not betrayal. Something she did not have a name for yet. Something like standing at the edge of a very large room you did not know existed, and understanding that the house you have lived in for 11 years has always contained it. After the children were in bed, she went to the hallway table. She picked up the letter. She brought it to the living room where Marco was sitting, reading, the lamp on, the house quiet. She held it out. He looked up. He saw the envelope, and Elena watched something happen on his face that she had never seen in 11 years. Not fear, not guilt, not the expression of a man caught. The expression of a man who has been carrying something for a very long time and has finally, after years and years and years, been handed permission to set it down. His face did not close. It opened, and he said, "Sit down. I'll tell you everything." He started at the beginning, not where she expected, not the obvious beginning, the one with names and crimes and the things she might have pieced together herself over 11 years of choosing not to look too closely. He started further back. He started at 19. "I grew up in El Paso," he said. His voice was even, not performing, not bracing, just saying. "My father ran things in the Segundo Barrio, not big, not like the organizations you read about, local, the kind that fills the space where everything else fails. When there are no jobs and the police don't come and the landlords take everything and leave nothing, someone fills the space. My father filled the space." Asterisk. He looked at his hands. "I thought he was powerful," he said. "When you are a child, power looks like the answer to everything. My father was never afraid. No one challenged him. Men came to him with problems and he solved them. I thought that was what it meant to be a man, to be the one who solved things." Asterisk. Elena sat across from him. She did not speak. She had spent 11 years learning when silence was what the person across from her needed. "At 19, I was working for him," Marco said. "Running things. Not the worst of it. I told myself that. Not the worst. There is always something worse you can point to that makes what you're doing feel like less." He paused. "That is the lie you tell yourself, that there is a level of it that is acceptable." His coffee cup was on the table. He turned it in his hands. "There was a man named Ramon de la Cruz." He said the name carefully, exactly the way you say the name of someone you have thought about every day for a long time. "He was 21. He worked for my father. He was not careful. He was impulsive, angry. He had grown up with worse than me, and it had made him harder. Not cruel, hard. There is a difference." Asterisk. Elena thought about the letter. "You saved my life." She kept her face still. "One night in November," Marco said, "Ramon made a mistake. A bad one. A mistake that would have cost him everything. The kind of mistake my father did not forgive. The kind my father would have handled the way he handled everything he did not forgive." Asterisk. He stopped. The lamp on the side table was warm and yellow. Outside, the street was quiet. "I was there," Marco said. "I was the one my father sent." Elena did not move. "I drove out to the meeting place. Ramon was there. He knew why I had come. He didn't run. He stood there and he knew and he didn't run, and I stood in front of him and I looked at him and I—" He stopped again. He breathed. "I had a younger brother," Marco said. "He died when I was 15. His name was Diego. He was 12. He got into something he was too young for and it went wrong and he died. And I spent 4 years telling myself Diego was weak. Diego didn't know how to survive. Diego was the one who made the mistake." Asterisk. He looked up. "Because the other possibility. The possibility that the world we were in was the one that killed him, not Diego himself. That possibility meant everything was wrong. Everything my father had built, everything I was building. And I was 19, and I was not ready to accept that everything was wrong." He looked at his hands again. Ramon was standing in front of me, he said, and he had eyes like Diego. Not the same face, not the same person, but that same look. The look of someone who had grown up in the same kind of world and had made the same kind of mistake and was standing there not running because where would he run and knowing what was coming? He set the coffee cup down. I told him to go, Marco said. I told him to take Maria, his girlfriend, and go. Far. Change everything. I told him if he stayed, I couldn't protect him. I told him if he went far enough, fast enough, my father would eventually stop looking. He paused. And then I went back, and I told my father it was done. The room was completely quiet. It wasn't done, Elena said, not a question. No, Marco said. But my father believed me. And 2 days later, Ramon and Maria were gone. And a week after that, D.I. was gone too. He told her about the leaving. Not the dramatic version, the real one. He had $200 and a bag with 3 days of clothes and a bus ticket to San Antonio. He had no plan. He had no one waiting. He had a name he was leaving behind and a version of himself he was trying to outrun, and the particular freedom of a person who has chosen the hardest possible road because the easier one had already cost too much. He got a job in San Antonio washing dishes, then cooking, then managing a small restaurant on the East Side. He learned how money worked from the legitimate side, slowly, making every mistake, starting over when he had to. He put together enough to buy a stake in a property, then another. He built not quickly, not dramatically, but with the patience of someone who has decided that slow and real is better than fast and hollow. He built a life. He did not look back. He did not contact his father. He did not contact Ramon, who had, as far as he knew, disappeared to somewhere far and was either alive and safe or was not, and Marco could not know which. And the not knowing was its own kind of penance, the uncertainty he carried as the price of the choice he had made. You sent him away to save him, Elena said. And then you left. Yes, you left everything. Yes. How old were you when you left? 20. Elena sat with that. 20 years old. Younger than Sophia would be in 7 years. Younger than any version of adulthood she could hold in her mind as real. Did you ever look back? She asked. Every day, Marco said. He said it plainly, without performance, without seeking her sympathy. A fact, a true thing said exactly. Every day? Every day, he said. I wondered if Ramon made it, if Maria made it, if the child she was carrying when they left. He stopped. Elena went still. Maria was pregnant, she said. Yes, that's Rosa. Yes, you didn't know if Rosa existed. He looked at her. His eyes, as still as they had been the first time she saw them across a diner counter, were completely full of something she had no word for. I have thought about that child, he said, every day for 23 years. She sat with it, not the performed sitting, not the sitting of someone managing their reaction for an audience, the real sitting. The kind that happens inside you when something very large arrives and the body understands before the mind does that it cannot be processed standing up. She sat with it for a long time. Marco did not rush her. He sat across from her, waiting, the way he had always waited, without urgency, without pressure, with the stillness that had been the first thing she noticed about him, and that she understood now was not indifference. It was the stillness of someone who has learned, the hard way, that forcing things only breaks them. She thought about 11 years. She thought about the coffee at the window. She thought about the way he held their children. She thought about every school play and pancake morning and hospital bedside. She thought about the morning Sophia had come home with a cut on her knee, not serious, but deep enough to need stitching, and Marco had been calm in the way only people with real experience of serious things are calm in the face of small things. She had thought then that it was a personality trait. She understood now that it was a history. She thought about the letter. "You saved my life." She thought about Ramon in a prison in Huntsville, Texas. She thought about him getting a visit from a daughter he had not expected. She thought about a 23-year-old woman sitting across glass from a father she had been told was dead, looking at his face and finding it familiar and not running from it. She thought about the choice Marco made at 20 years old, standing in the dark with a task he had been sent to finish, looking at a man with eyes like his dead brother, making a decision that cost him everything he had and gave him nothing for years. She thought, what kind of person does that? She thought, I know exactly what kind. She had been married to him for 11 years. She already knew. "You were 20 years old," she said finally. "Yes. And you chose—" She stopped. "I reorganized. You chose the harder thing. I chose the right thing," Marco said. "Finally. And then you spent 23 years not knowing if it had worked." He was quiet. "That's—" she started. She stopped. She looked at him. The lamp still warm. The house still quiet. The man across the table that she had shared mornings and crises and children and years with. That must have been. She stopped again because there was no adequate end to that sentence. Marco waited. How did you carry that?" she asked. Not angry, genuinely asking. "How did you carry something that heavy for that long and still—" She looked toward the hallway where their children were sleeping. "Still be this?" Marco looked at her for a moment. "You," he said. The word landed between them. "Before you," he said, "I carried it alone. And alone it gets heavier. Not lighter. Every year heavier. Because there is no one to put it down in front of. No one who knows the whole shape of it. You carry it and it grows into the shape of the space inside you, and eventually you cannot tell where you end and it begins." Asterisk. He looked at his hands. "Then I met you," he said. "And I built something. Something real. Something that existed because I made the right choice instead of the wrong one. And for the first time, I had somewhere to put the weight down, not by talking about it. Just by being somewhere that proved the choice had been worth making." He looked up. "You were the proof," he said. "Sophia and Matteo are the proof. This house, this life, the fact that I became someone worth knowing." Elena stared at him. "I wanted to tell you," he said. 1,000 times I wanted to tell you. But there was never a moment when I believed you would stay after. And I could not risk losing the proof." Silence, long, heavy. Then Elena said, "You should have trusted me." "Yes," Marco said. "I should have. You should have trusted me 11 years ago. Yes, I'm angry about that, I know. I'm going to be angry about that for a while, I know." She looked at him. "But I'm not leaving," she said. His face did the thing it had done when she held out the envelope. It opened. Not dramatic, not tearful, just a man letting something go that he had held for too long. "I know Rosa doesn't know about you," Elena said. "Easy, I know she only knows Ramon's side of the story." "Yes." She deserves to know yours." Marco was quiet. "She deserves to know," Elena said, "that the reason her father is alive is because a 20-year-old boy in El Paso chose the right thing when every part of the world he grew up in told him to choose the wrong one." Marco looked at her for a long time. But then he said, "I don't know if I deserve to tell her that." And Elena said, "That's not for you to decide." She did not do what other women might have done. She did not fall apart. She did not call her mother in the middle of the night and whisper everything into the phone. She did not go through the house looking for other things she had not known. She did not reopen 11 years in search of the lies. She did what nurses do. She assessed. She sat at the kitchen table the following morning after Marco had left for work and the children were at school, and she spread the letter on the table in front of her, and she read it again, once, all the way through, carefully. Not for new information, for the shape of it, for the understanding of what had happened and what it meant and what now needed to be done. She was not a woman who had married a monster and discovered it too late. She was a woman who had married a complicated man who had made a terrible world and then walked away from it at 20 years old and spent 2 decades building something better, and who had been unable for 11 years to trust her enough to show her the whole of it. That was the truth. That was the full, complete truth. She sat with it until it was fully hers. Then she opened her laptop. She found the correctional facility in Huntsville. She found the visiting procedures. She sat for a moment. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She wrote a letter. Not to Ramon. To Rosa. She had no address for Rosa, but the letter addressed through the facility would eventually find its way through Ramon to his daughter if he chose to pass it on, and she believed he would choose to pass it on, or because a man who had written to Marco after 8 years of silence asking him to tell his wife the truth was not a man who would block the truth once it started moving. The letter took her 2 hours to write, not because she did not know what to say, because she knew exactly what to say, and every sentence needed to be exactly right. She wrote about Marco, not the businessman, not the property owner, not the man the Austin neighborhood knew. She wrote about the man at the kitchen window. She wrote about the school plays and the pancake mornings. She wrote about the way he had held Sophia for the first time, sitting in the hospital chair at 2 a.m, not sleeping, just holding her, as if the world outside might try to take her and he was the only thing between her and it. She wrote about what she had learned the night before. She wrote, "Your father is alive because of my husband. I think you deserve to know the full story. I think you deserve to know who Marco Vasquez is, not because he is perfect, not because his history is simple, but because you came looking for the truth and you deserve to have all of it." She wrote, "My husband has been carrying guilt about that night for 23 years. Not because of what he did, because he never knew if it worked. He never knew if your father made it. He never knew if you existed." She wrote, "He didn't know about you, but I want you to know. You were thought about. You were worried over. You were part of a choice that a 20-year-old boy made when he could have made the other one." She wrote, "If you ever want to know more, you can write to me." She sealed it. She put Rosa's name on the front and the facility address, and in the care of section, Ramon de la Cruz. She drove to the post office. She mailed it. She drove home. She made lunch. That evening, Elena told Marco what she had done. They were in the kitchen. He was at the window with his coffee, the way he always was. She stood at the counter and she told him about the letter, what she had written, who she had sent it to, what it said. He did not speak for a long time. The window was dark. The street outside was ordinary evening. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know. Why did you?" She looked at him. "Because you couldn't," she said. "Not yet. And because she deserves to know. And someone needed to go first." He turned from the window. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the diner that first Saturday. Settled, still, fully present. "How do you do that?" he said. "Do what? See exactly what needs doing and go do it." She almost smiled. 11 years of watching you carry things," she said. "I got good at spotting the weight." He crossed the kitchen. He held her the way he had held Sophia in the hospital chair at 2 a.m. Not dramatically, not performed, but completely. The embrace of a man who does not take the person in his arms for granted. She held him back. She did not tell him it was okay, because it was not entirely okay. There were things about his past she still did not fully know. There were doors still closed. There was anger in her, honest and real, but about 11 years of carrying something alone that she could have helped carry. She did not tell him it was okay. She let him hold her and she held him back, and they stood in the kitchen in the ordinary light, and that was enough for tonight. That was enough. 6 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Not pale blue this time, white. The return address was San Marcos, Texas, a home address, a name she recognized, Rosa de la Cruz. Elena picked it up from the mailbox and stood in the driveway in the afternoon light and felt her heart do something it had not done since the day she sat on the hallway floor. She went inside. She set it on the kitchen table. She waited for Marco. He came home at 6:15. He hung his jacket. He called out. The house answered. He came to the kitchen and stopped. He saw the envelope. He sat down. Elena sat across from him. He opened it. He read it slowly. His eyes moved down the page without rushing. His face did not change. His hands were steady. His breathing was even. Elena waited. He read to the end. He put the letter down. He sat very still for a moment. Then Marco Vasquez, the man who had not cried since the funeral of his brother Diego at 15 years old, closed his eyes, and 2 tears ran down his face. Not theatrically, not with sound, just 2 tears, quiet and serious, the way everything about him was quiet and serious. He kept his eyes closed for a long moment. Then he opened them. He looked at Elena. "She doesn't hate me," he said. "No," Elena said. "She says—" He stopped. His voice was rougher than usual. "She says she grew up knowing her father was a good man who made bad choices. She says her mother told her that even when she said he was dead. She carried that, this whole time." He looked at the letter. "She says she wants to know if I would be willing to meet." Elena did not speak. She says—" He stopped again. "She says she asked her father about me, and her father said—" Ramon said. He cleared his throat. He said I was the only person in that world who ever chose him over the job. Silence. Elena reached across the table. She put her hand over his. "What do you want to do?" she asked. He looked at her hand over his. He looked at the letter. "I want to meet her," he said. "If you think it's right." "I think it's right," Elena said. "I'm afraid," he said. Well, he said it the way he said everything true, plainly, without apology. I know, Elena said. What if she looks at me and she sees... She's already looked, Elena said. She wrote back. She already decided. He was quiet. She did the same thing you did, Elena said. She went looking for a truth she was afraid of, and she showed up anyway. She's her father's daughter. Marco looked at his wife. She's also... He stopped. She's the same age you were when I met you. Elena smiled. Not small, real. Then you already know, she said, how to sit across from someone that age and be honest. They drove to San Marcos on a Saturday. Not with the children, not yet. This was not yet a moment for children. This was the moment before the moment, the one you have to get through to know if there will be a moment after. Marco drove. He was quiet the way he was always quiet on drives, not absent, just inside himself, using the road to think. Elena watched the hill country go by, the cedar and the mesquite, the light on the hills going gold in the morning. She thought about the diner. She thought about the first drive they had taken, windows down through this exact landscape. He had talked about his grandmother, about cooking, about light. He had not talked about Ramon. He had not talked about El Paso. He had not talked about Diego. She had loved him anyway. She had loved him without the full story. The way you often love people. From the outside in, understanding the edges before the center, learning the center slowly over years. She understood the center now. She was not less in love. She was more. That surprised her. She had expected when the full truth arrived to find something that diminished him, something that made the image smaller. That is what we fear about other people's histories. That knowing will reduce. That the things they have carried will turn out to be too heavy for the person we chose. It had not reduced him. It had made him larger. Not in the way of someone elevated, in the way of something revealed, like a photograph coming into focus. Not a different subject, the same one, only clear now. They met Rosa at a diner. Of course it was a diner. She was sitting in a booth by the window when they walked in. She stood when she saw them. She was small, like her father, Ramon, probably. Dark hair. Dark eyes that were very still. Elena looked at those still, dark eyes and felt something move in her chest. Marco stopped walking for just a moment. One moment, then he walked forward. Rosa held out her hand. He shook it. They looked at each other. This man of 53 who had made a choice at 20 years old, and this 23-year-old woman who was the living result of that choice walking away. And neither of them looked away first. "You look like your father," Marco said, his eyes. "My mother always said that," Rosa said. "She said it like it was complicated." "It was," Marco said. "It was complicated." They sat down. They talked for 3 hours. Marco told her the story. Not the version he had given Elena, not the shortened version, the real one, all the way through, with the details he had kept inside him for 23 years. He talked about Ramon. He talked about the night in November. He talked about the choice. He talked about Diego. He talked about El Paso and the bus ticket and the $200 and the dishes and the long years of building. Rosa listened. She asked questions. Good questions. The questions of someone who is not looking to be told what they want to hear, but is looking for the complete shape of the truth. She asked, "Were you afraid?" "Yes," Marco said. "Of my father? Or of what you'd have to do?" "Of what I'd have to do," Marco said. of who I'd become if I did it. And that's why you didn't. That's why I didn't. Rosa was quiet for a moment. My father told me something, she said. Before I came today, he said, tell him I never hated him. Tell him the choice he made was the only clean thing either of us did in those years, and I've held on to it. Marco looked at the table. He also said, Rosa paused. He said, tell him thank you, not for saving me, for reminding me that I still had a choice about who to be. Marco did not close his eyes this time. He stayed open. He accepted it. Tell him, Marco said. His voice caught for just a moment. Tell him the same back. This is the part of the story that people misunderstand when they hear the title. They expect the horror to be about crime. They expect Elena to have discovered that her husband was a different man than she believed. A darker one. A more dangerous one. They expect to be told she was wrong about him all along. But that is not what she discovered. What Elena Vasquez discovered at 34 years old, sitting in a diner booth in San Marcos, Texas, watching her husband of 11 years sit across from a 23-year-old woman and speak the truth he had carried alone for longer than their marriage had existed, was that she had underestimated him. Not in the direction of danger, in the direction of depth. She had thought she knew the size of him. She had not known the size of him. She had loved the man at the kitchen window, the man who held their children, the man who showed up. She had loved that man fully and with her whole self, but she had not known that the man at the kitchen window existed because a 20-year-old boy in the dark had made a choice that cost everything and gave nothing back for years. She had not known the size of the thing he had overcome to become the man she knew. She had not known about Diego. She had not known about the weight he had carried into every ordinary morning for 2 decades and set down quietly so that she would not see it. She had not known. And knowing changed nothing about the man she had married, except that now she could see all of him. And seeing all of him was, the word she came back to always was horrifying, but not the horror of something terrible, the horror of something enormous. The way you stand at the edge of the ocean and the horizon goes further than you can measure, and the size of it does something to your chest that is bigger than any word you have for it. She had stood at the edge of him and found the horizon further than she expected. That was the horror. That was the discovery. She told Sophia and Mateo about it in the way you tell children about complicated things. Not everything, not at once, not more than the shape of it requires. But she did not lie. She had never lied to her children. She did not intend to begin. She sat them down one afternoon, Sophia at 14, Mateo at 11, and she told them that their father had a past that was harder than they knew, that he had grown up in a difficult world, that he had made a choice, young, to leave that world and build something different. She told them about Rosa, not the full story. Enough. She told them, your father spent a long time carrying something very heavy alone. He thought he had to. He was wrong. But the reason he carried it was because he didn't want it to touch you. Sophia, who was her father's daughter in every important way, sat with this for a long time. Then she said, he should have told us. Yes, Elena said. We could have helped. Yes. Why didn't he think we could help? Elena looked at her daughter. Because, she said, when you love people, you sometimes think protecting them means keeping the heavy things away from them. Your father loves us so much. He thought he had to carry it by himself. Sophia thought about this. "That's not what love is," Sophia said. "No," Elena said, "it's not. Love is letting the people who love you help carry it." Sophia looked toward the kitchen, where Marco was making dinner, his back to them, the sound of the pan. "I'm going to tell him that," Sophia said. "I think you should," Elena said.
Sophia got up. She went to the kitchen. She stood beside her father at the stove. She said something Elena could not hear from the living room. She watched Marco stop stirring. She watched him look at his daughter. She watched the look on his face. She did not hear what Sophia said. She did not need to. 3 months after the letter, Elena drove to Huntsville. She went alone. She had thought about whether Marco should come.
She had decided that this was not Marco's meeting to have first. That was still coming. It would come. But this one was hers. She had told Marco she was going. He had been quiet for a long time. "Why?" he asked. "Because," she said, "you gave Ramon his life, and in giving him his life, you gave me mine. I'd like to thank the man who has the other side of that story." Marco looked at her for a long moment. "You are," he started. "Don't," she said. "Elena." "I know," she said, "I know. But don't say it yet. There's still the angry part." Asterisk, he almost smiled. The same almost smile she had seen 11 years of, the smile that never quite arrived. She had always thought it was a contained person thing. She understood now it was a man who did not fully trust that good things were allowed. She was going to spend the rest of her life teaching him they were. She drove to Huntsville on a Tuesday. She sat across the glass from Ramon de la Cruz. He was in his early 50s, gray at the temples. He was not what she had expected, and he was exactly what she had expected. He had Rosa's eyes, or rather, Rosa had his. That same stillness, that same quality of presence that did not flinch. He looked at her across the glass. He said, "You look like someone who doesn't scare easily." She said, "I married your friend. I've been practicing for 20 years. Something moved in his face. "He told you," Ramon said. "Oh, yes. Everything?" "Yes, and you're still here. I'm still here." Ramon was quiet. "I've thought about his family," he said, "all these years. I never knew if he had one, if he had made it into something real. I didn't let myself look. I thought if I looked and he had and it was good, I would." He stopped. "I wouldn't be able to stand what I lost by making the choices I made." "He made it into something real," Elena said. "I can see that," Ramon said. "Our Rosa told me about your letter. She read parts of it to me over the phone." He paused. "You didn't have to do that." "He wouldn't have," Elena said. "Not yet. Someone needed to go first. That was kind." "It was necessary," she said. "There is a difference." He almost smiled. "You really are something," he said. "So is your daughter," she said. "She walked into a diner last month and looked at my husband across a table and didn't flinch. She has your eyes. Your stillness. Whatever you did with all these years in here, whatever you found, she has it." Ramon looked at his hands. "I had a long time to think," he said. "I know. I made very bad choices. I know. I've thought about what Marco did for me every day," he said. "Not the way you think about a debt, the way you think about a mirror. Because for years I kept asking myself, if the positions has been switched, would I have done the same thing? Would I have made the hard choice?" He paused, and for a long time the answer was no. He looked up. But I think, he said, that watching what he chose, even from a distance, even never knowing the details, just knowing that somewhere he had chosen differently, I think that changed me. Slowly. Over years. I think it showed me the choice existed. Elena sat with that. Tell him that, she said. Not through Rosa, yourself. Write to him. I didn't think he wants, she said. He carries you every day the same way you carry him. Both of you have been carrying each other in the dark for 23 years. It's time to put the lights on. Ramon looked at her for a long moment. I'll write, he said. Good. Elena drove home from Huntsville. 5 hours. The Texas highway going north through flat land and mesquite and the occasional town, the kind of towns that hold themselves together through sheer stubbornness. She drove and she thought. She thought about the women she had grown up knowing. Her mother, who had made Sunday dinner for 12 without writing anything down. Her grandmother, who had worked 2 jobs for 40 years and never once asked for recognition. The women she worked with at the hospital. Nurses who held hands and made calls and delivered news no one wanted to receive, and did it with steady voices and returned to the floor 5 minutes later to do it again. She thought about what all of those women shared. Not strength exactly, or not only strength, something adjacent to it. The capacity to see a hard thing clearly and love it anyway, not despite what it was. Not by making it into something smaller or more manageable, but as exactly the hard and real and complete thing that it was. She thought about Marco at 20 years old. She thought about the choice in the dark. She thought about Diego, whose name she had heard for the first time 48 hours ago and who had been part of her family's story all along. The ghost in the weight her husband carried, the name behind the choice. She thought, I want to know Diego, not the tragedy of him, the person. She would ask Marco about him. She would ask about the boy who had been 12 years old and made a mistake. She would ask what his laugh was like, what he liked. What kind of person he had been becoming before he didn't get to finish becoming it. She would give Diego his name in their family. She would put his photograph somewhere it could be seen. She would make sure Sofia and Mateo knew his name. Because the things we carry do not become lighter by hiding them. They become heavier. They take up the shape of the space around them, and eventually you cannot breathe. What makes them lighter is names and light. And the person sitting across from you, reaching across the table saying, I see it. I see all of it. I'm not going anywhere. Elena had been that person for Marco without knowing the full story. Now she knew, and knowing made her more of it, not less. 6 months after the letter. The kitchen, yellow walls. Dinner on the table. Sofia at 14 doing something on her phone with the particular focused speed of a teenager who has been told dinner is in 2 minutes. Mateo at 11 already eating, because Mateo started eating the moment food appeared, and no social convention had yet changed this. Marco at the stove, Elena at the table, the ordinary evening, the exact same ordinary evening they had been living for 11 years. Except. On the refrigerator, beside Sofia's school schedule and Mateo's soccer tournament bracket and the takeout menu they always said they would throw out and never did, there was a new photograph. A young man. 17. Me 18, dark hair, the specific smile of a teenager who's been told to sit still for a photo and has almost succeeded. Standing in front of what appeared to be a very ordinary car on a very ordinary afternoon in El Paso, Texas. Diego. Marco had found it in a box he had not opened in 20 years. He had given it to Elena without ceremony, simply set it on the table one morning and said, "I thought it should be somewhere it could be seen." She had put it on the refrigerator that afternoon. He had come home that evening and looked at it for a long moment. He had not said anything. He had not needed to. The pot on the stove was making the sound it made before it needed stirring. Marco reached for the spoon. He stirred. He looked out the window. Coffee, Elena thought. He would have coffee after dinner, standing at the window. She knew this. She had always known this. She knew it differently now. She knew it as the morning ritual of a man who had walked a long way to be at this window, who had left everything at 20 and built this from nothing, from a bus ticket and $200 and the decision to choose differently every day for 33 years. She knew the window better now. She loved it more. "Matteo," Marco said, not turning from the stove. Elbows. Matteo moved his elbows off the table with the automatic compliance of a child who has had this conversation many times. "Sophia," Marco said. "Phone." Sophia put the phone face down beside her plate with the elaborate patience of a teenager performing sacrifice. Marco turned from the stove with the pot. He set it on the table. He looked at his family. For one moment, just one, he looked at all of them. Elena, Sophia, Matteo, the yellow walls, the photograph on the refrigerator, the ordinary evening, with the look of a man who knows exactly what it cost to be here. Then he sat down. "Eat," he said. They ate. Here is what Elena knows now that she did not know before the letter. She knows that the most important things about a person are often the heaviest ones, the ones they could not find the words for, the ones they carried alone for years because they did not believe you would stay if you saw them. She knows that staying is not nothing. She knows that 11 years of ordinary mornings meant something to a man who had not believed, at 20 years old, that he would ever have 11 years of ordinary mornings. That every cup of coffee at the kitchen window was a choice, not the dramatic kind, the quiet, daily, continued kind. The choice to stay in the life he had built, to deserve it, to not go back. She knows that the things we carry alone become heavier every year. She knows that love is not the absence of the hard things. Love is the willingness to see the hard things, to name them, to put them somewhere they can be seen, and to say, "This is also part of you, and I'm still here." She knows that a man can spend 30 years becoming someone worth knowing and still be afraid to show the person who knows him best what he came from. And she knows that fear is not a reason to stop going forward. It is the only real measure of courage, because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the letter you write when you are terrified. It is the drive to Huntsville. It is the hand you reach across the table. It is staying. Rosa de la Cruz met her mother's sister for the first time last year. She found family she did not know existed. She is applying to nursing school in San Antonio. She and Elena have dinner once a month. Ramon de la Cruz wrote to Marco. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Marco read it at the kitchen table, standing the way he drank his coffee. He read it twice. He folded it carefully. He put it in the pocket over his heart. He did not speak for a long time. Then he looked at Elena and said very quietly, "He says we're even." Elena looked at him. "You're not even," she said. "You never will be. That's not how it works." "No, it doesn't go away," she said. "The past, what happened, none of it goes away. It just becomes part of the story." Yes. And the story? She looked at the refrigerator, at Diego's photograph, at Mateo's soccer tournament bracket, at the takeout menu they would never throw out. The story is still going. Marco looked at her. That stillness, those eyes. Yes, he said, it is. If this story reached something in you, please hit the like button. It takes 1 second and it means everything. Drop a comment. Tell me, have you ever discovered something about someone you love that changed how you saw them? Not less, but more. Have you ever been carrying something you thought you had to carry alone? I read every single comment, every one. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. New ones every week. And remember this, the people we love are almost always larger than we know. And the best thing we can do, for them and for ourselves, is look long enough to see the whole of it. See you next time.